Well, howdy. Pastor Mark Driscoll here with my son-in-law, Landon, and you run Real Face, so thanks for that. And he wanted to have a conversation about becoming a dad. Now, technically, you are a dad. The baby's right here, and pretty soon will be right here, like any minute. Your wife, my daughter, she's pregnant.
Super pregnant.
Super pregnant. And so you're going to be a dad. For the first time, you're going to meet your kid any minute, and if we just cut early and run, it's game time. So where do you want to start? Conversation becoming a first-time dad.
Yeah, first-time dad. So I thought I sat down and just wrote out some of my top questions, and hopefully this is helpful for people online. But how do you change as a man when you have your first kid?
Yeah, so when you're a little boy, everybody takes care of you.
Yeah.
And then as you become kind of a young man, you have more responsibility. You've got a car, driver's license, you've got homework, maybe your part-time job. And then you flip to where you leave your mother and father, and now you're responsible for yourself. You got to pay your own bills. And then the next level of responsibility is you take a wife. And now it's like, okay, I got to consider her. I realize I'm selfish. I got to generate revenue. I got to protect her, make sure she's good. And then she gets pregnant. And I'm sure you're feeling this right now. And that is like, holy smokes. Like, my wife is now carrying my baby. She's vulnerable. I got to make sure they're safe. He's probably going to want food and a roof. So I got to provide,
So selfish.
And so all of this responsibility comes on, which is wonderful and it's glorious and it's good, but it's a weight of responsibility that a man's never carried before. Yeah. And so for some guys, they really try to reduce or jettison that responsibility. The earlier you can just own it entirely, like, this is my wife, this is my kid, this is my family, this is my responsibility. There's a dignity that God puts into man to where it's like, I was made for this, and people have been doing this for a long time, and so I can do this. And I believe that then God's grace kicks in to help you out and to carry that load of responsibility. But I'll tell you, there's something supernatural that happens when you, as a man, hold your child. There's something there that's in the spirit, and there's something where it's like, oh my goodness, especially with a son, it's like, you got to look at him and say, someday he's going to be a husband, he's going to be a father, he's going to be a Christian, he's going to be a leader. And between now and then, I'm his dad.
Yeah.
And I have this opportunity to evangelize and disciple this human being and to help them get ready for whatever God has plotted out for them. And so for me, I would say, I think you're going to be an incredible dad. You love kids. You love being a dad. You're going to love being a dad. It's the best job in the world. But at the end of the day, the reason that some guys don't take on that full responsibility, I think it's fear or anxiety, or they didn't have a dad, or they think they're going to fail. And the truth is, if you want to be a great dad, you're going to be a great dad. It's really simple, because you'll figure it out if you want to. Yeah. And you're gonna like it. You're gonna love it. It's, I'm at the age now where, like, my oldest son is married and has a son.
Yeah.
And it feels like I was sitting where you are not that long ago. I remember holding my son for the first time and praying for him, and then praying for his son. Mm-hmm. And now he's holding his son. Yeah. It's cool as a man to think in terms of legacy and lineage, and it's cool to see all those developmental stages. You're going to love it. It's going to be hard work. He's going to throw up on you. You're going to be up in the middle of the night, but it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So where would you say, like, the passive dad, the dad that's sitting in the armchair with a beer watching football, ignoring his family, where does that come from?
Well, I think, for some guys, their thought is, raising children is women's work.
Yeah.
But that's not what the Bible says.
Yeah.
And so if you think culturally, or you think chauvinistically, you think, well, raising kids, that's women's work. It's like, no, if you read the Bible, God's a father. And so fathering starts with God. He fathers us. And then the Bible talks a lot, let's say in Proverbs, where it's this dad over and over and over instructing the kids. His son, do this, son, don't do that. Son, when you pick a girl, don't pick this kind of girl. Mm-hmm. She's, her steps go down to hell, it literally says. And so it's an active present dad. And then you read, like in Ephesians, it says, fathers, bring your children up in the instruction and admonition of the Lord. And so the Bible has a lot to say about fathers and fatherhood. And because of the culture we live in, unfortunately, most men are not trained or encouraged to be husbands or fathers.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the care of children is passed off to women. And women, a mother should be primary caregiver, but that means that dad also needs to understand his role. And I think your generation, probably more than my dad's generation, the men are more likely to be engaged and involved. And I think that's a really good and healthy thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So empathize with me for a minute. So if I sat here and I told you I didn't want to provide for my family and I thought the government should, what would you say to me?
Yeah, that's not a man at all. I mean, and at the end of the day, any guy who is willing to sire but not father is an evil man. And, you know, it's easy to sire children. It's hard to father them. And there's a lot of guys that love sex but not women. And they love sex but not children. And those guys are evil, and they're a danger, and they're a problem because they break and harm women and children, and then they make the rest of us go to work and get taxed to clean up their mess that was their responsibility. I mean, the Bible says if a man does not provide for the needs of his family, he's denied the faith and he's worse than an unbeliever. And so, you know, any guy who doesn't work and provide, there should be no respect for him. And quite frankly, there should be no compensation for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree.
Yeah, and the more you get those guys, that's why right now you've got massive personal debt, you've got massive governmental debt, and at some point, if men don't, and I'm reading the re-release of Gilder's book, and he basically says economies are built by men who have wives and kids to feed. And as soon as men don't feel the pressure to feed their wives and kids, then you don't have an economy, and eventually you don't have a nation.
Yeah. Well, I see it as an honor to provide for my family. So
totally, I know that. Yeah, I'm not worried about it at all. You do great, and you've done a great job protecting and providing. And just as a dad, it really is a great joy to see your daughter married, loved, happy, safe, growing, joyful. My goal as a dad was never to have my daughters be my little girl my whole life. Like, I want them to get married. I want them to fall in love. I want them to be a mom. I want them to grow up and enjoy their life. And as a dad, you know, you're the main man in your daughter's life until her husband comes. And then literally at the altar, you're literally shifting positions. You're literally like, I was in first position. Now I'm not. But when it's a guy that loves your daughter with his whole heart and is fully committed to her well-being, it's a great relief. And I always told my sons growing up, I said, you're going to meet two kind of girls you can live with, and then you're going to meet one girl you can't live without. That's your wife. And I know that, you know, that with Ashley, that's the girl you couldn't live without.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and as a dad, you're like, praise God, that's what I was hoping for. Yeah.
I was talking to, I'll say a friend, and they told me having kids ruin your life. What would you say to that?
If you're selfish, absolutely. And the Bible has a lot to say about being a servant. And it's all positive. And the Bible has a lot to say about selfishness, and it's all negative. If you're a highly selfish person, children ruin your life because they don't accommodate you. You have to accommodate them. They're going to get sick. They're going to have night terrors. They're going to throw up in the car, guaranteed. They are going to need you to provide time and money and energy and patience that, quite frankly, if you're selfish, you don't want to give and share. And so selfish people make terrible parents. They also make terrible spouses, and they also just make terrible Christians. And so, you know, if you believe that serving is actually a ministry and a blessing and makes you more like Jesus, kids are wonderful because they give you that opportunity. And for me as a man, it's like, if as a man you don't wake up and think, who do I bless? What do I give? Who do I protect? What do I provide? You know, what investment or deposit do I make? If you're thinking like a consumer instead of a producer, you're still acting like a little boy. You're not thinking like a man. You know, a man wakes up and is like, okay, who can I help? A boy wakes up and thinks, who's going to help me?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a man in 2023, is it wise to have children?
Yeah. I mean, look at the world. It's got a bunch of terrible people. So we need to add some better people.
Yeah.
And the people are like, what about overpopulation? Whatever. There's plenty of room. There's plenty of resources. Most Americans are fat. Like, we're doing fine, and at the end of the day, people that are thinking, the world is a bad place. Well, it is. That's why we need to raise good kids who love Jesus and will preach the gospel and try and turn the tide. And so, you look at one kid like Daniel in Babylon and the difference that he makes. Yeah. Mine is like, all right, let's just raise Daniels and send them into Babylon.
Mm-hmm. So then the other side of that is like Elon Musk or Kanye West having as many children as possible.
They're just siring. Mm. Yeah, like was it Nick Cannon?
Uh-huh.
I mean, his Christmas photos got to have like a wide angle lens. He's got so many kids. Panoramic. Panoramic, And that's the difference between siring and fathering.
Yeah.
Fathering is a deep investment in the relationship and the life of the child. Siring's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you're just a sniper. You just one shot, one kill, and move on. It's like that's not fathering.
There's a lot of responsibility in being a father.
There's a tremendous amount of responsibility. I mean, it's your kid. I mean, where are they going to live? Are they going to hear about God? What are they going to eat? Are they going to get abused? Are they going to be traumatized? Will they learn to read and write? I mean, like at the end of the day, a father will stand before God and give an account for his child. Now, the mother will as well, but because the father is head of household, he is in the primary position of responsibility for the well-being of the child. And so, and this is where you'll find this, your kids are all different. Like, you have kids and they're different. And a lot of times the dad's thinking, well, this is how I am. And it's like, well, but if you're going to be a good dad, you've got to become the dad that each of your children need.
Yeah.
Your children don't adjust to you and your parenting style. You adjust to them. And it's like, okay, this kid's an introvert. This kid's an extrovert. This kid's arrogant. This kid is insecure. This kid is a genius. This kid's pretty normal. And what do they need? This kid's a jock. This kid's not. Like, okay, what kind of dad does this child need? And then how do I become the father that they need rather than demanding that they be the child that conforms to my preferred way of fathering? And so, again, that's where the serving piece is so gigantic. I mean, it's like your kids need you to be what they need you to be.
Yeah. So let's talk about what does your wife need from you? So what would be some God-honoring sacrifices and maybe some things you shouldn't sacrifice in marriage when you have your first child?
So your priorities don't change, but the children don't know that. So, your first priority is God, and then it's your wife, and then it's each of your kids individually. And when they're little, you can treat them like a group. As they get bigger, you need to have a personal relationship with each child. They have different personalities and interests, and they're maturing at different levels. And eventually you got to get into their world and their friends and their sports and, and their concerns. Grace and I made the mistake that every couple makes, and that is once the children or child comes or children come, the wife's proclivity is to invert the child over the husband as the priority. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden the kid is the priority and the husband feels a little neglected.
Yeah.
There's reasons for that. I mean, that child is part of her, which as a man, like wait till you see your son come out of your wife. You're like, yeah, I'm never going to fully understand that. There's a connection at the biological soul level that is just very unique between mother and child. And then once she births the child, all the hormones and everything in the woman is hardwired by God to love, to nurture, to feed, to care for. All those instincts kick in. And then if she is breastfeeding, it's an additional level of literally biological, neurological connection. Yeah. And then this child is fully dependent on her. And so her whole focus is, how do I love and care for this child? The husband, he gets distracted at work because all of a sudden he's like feeling the pressure of like, I've got to produce, revenue for my family. And so he throws a lot of his energy into work. So for the husband now, work starts to become inverted priority. For the wife, child becomes inverted priority. And they both can say they're doing it out of love for their family, but they're not loving each other as best as they could. Yeah. And so then the man's at work too much, or when he comes home, he's still got work on his mind. So he's distracted and diverted, or he's back on his phone or laptop. And the woman is so devoted to being a mother that she kind of neglects her husband. And this is where the marriage kind of usually has a strain when the children enter the equation. And if you don't fix that, it's like two train tracks, like the man's at work and the woman's at home, and they kind of just do shoulder to shoulder, not face to face well. And then when you hit our age, as you know, we've got one left at home. He's a senior. He's getting ready to launch. I mean, he kind of already has launched. And then we're going to be empty nesters. And if we don't have our marriage as a priority, then when the kids leave, our marriage craters. And we're seeing that with a lot of our friends, even Christians. You're like, man, that thing imploded. Well, it's because work and kids were the priority and marriage was not.
Yeah.
And once the kids are gone and you don't have the financial pressure that you did in the early years, if the marriage isn't invested in, it craters.
Yeah.
And I think too, the best thing you can do for your kids is just model, healthy relationship with God and spouse. And if your kids are like, they love Jesus and mom and dad love each other and they make those relationships a priority, I think that creates a safe, secure environment for the child.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't feel like they need to. Otherwise, you feel, as a kid, you can even grow up in an anxious environment where it's like you're trying to help mommy and daddy get along. You're trying to help mommy and daddy work things out. And it's like that should never be something that the child has to be thinking about. They shouldn't be the bridge between mom and dad.
Yeah. Yeah. So overbearing parents and in-laws, how does that play into having your first kid?
So if you have a dysfunctional family system, it'll become a generational pattern unless you reset. And so, I wish we had a whiteboard. So when you, I don't know if you remember this, you were wanting to marry Ashley, and we all were great with that. We love you and appreciate you. And it was like, yep, that's going to be a great marriage. And I don't know if you remember, I drew some circles, and a dysfunctional system is, here's the circle, and this is your family. And when you marry, you're marrying into the family. And so for you as like a young family, so Ashley grew up in a family, you grew up in a family. Let's say these are two circles. Well, if the thought is that Ashley is joining your family or you're joining our family, that puts you in an impossible position and situation because you don't have your own family. Mm-hmm. And so, I drew the three circles. There's like our family, there's our extended family, your extended family, and then you and Ashley are starting a new family.
Yep.
And now where those circles overlap, all of that has to be discussed and negotiated, And so, like we're going to have a family meeting coming up, and it's now that 3 of our kids are married. Now what we have is we have 4 families.
Yeah.
In our extended families, your family, Zach's family, Calvin's family. There's 3 families plus my family, 4 families. Well, when Christmas comes, what do these 4 families want to do? Mm-hmm. When, Thanksgiving comes, what do these 4 families want to do? When it comes to, your kids, our grandkids, these 3 other families, they're going to want to raise their kids according to their convictions. So, how do we serve all 3 of these families as the grandparents? And so if you don't have these conversations, what usually happens is pressure builds up, and then you're either, the social scientists will say, enmeshed, where your family just kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
And and the holidays are bad and vacations are bad, and you're frustrated and you're like, I don't enjoy my life because I don't feel like I have my family. Or then total abandonment, to where it's like, that's it, I'm done. We're never talking to them again. We're moving halfway across the country. And so the question is, rather than being completely buried in one big dysfunctional family or completely abandoning, can we negotiate a way to have a healthy differentiation to where that's your family, this is our family, and these are the things and ways that we do life together. And if the dad doesn't lead this conversation, if the husband and father, like in my position, if I don't lead that, what happens is usually the mother has a hard time letting the children go. Usually she has fears and control issues, especially if she's religious or Christian. and or she's used to serving and loving to the degree that she just needs to be needed. And then she gets very emotional because she takes it personal and feels rejected or hurt because she didn't get her expectations that were often unspoken, which means they're unreasonable met. And then the kids are in the position of like, gosh, we made mom cry. And it's like rock, paper, scissors, mom crying, mom always wins.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, well, how do we have the conversation that it doesn't get to that point where the kids are wanting to hit the eject button or mom is crying?
Yeah.
And the more kids you've got and the different spouses and kids and it's more complicated, but it can't feel like someone's winning and somebody's losing.
Yeah.
And you can't pull out the, obey your mother and father card, because in the Bible, that's the word there literally is for young children. It's not for a grown man. You're a grown man, and so at this point, Ashley's first responsibility is to the Lord. Her second is to you. And you guys are a family. And you guys get to figure out what you want to do. And then you tell us how we can support your family.
Yeah.
But that means I'm no longer in the first position in Ashley's life.
Yeah.
And honestly, I actually am really glad because, I'm going to die before Ashley. And I want her to be good when I'm not around.
Yeah.
And so if you guys have a good family and are praying and walking with the Lord, then she's going to have a good life even when I'm not around. And I love her so much. I don't want to just have a good life when I'm around. I want her to have a good life long after I'm gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that same vein, what advice would you give me in supporting Ashley these next couple weeks? Like from delivery room to that first couple weeks of baby.
Ministry of presence. As a husband, when she's having a baby, you're like, there's not a lot I could do.
No.
I could take out the trash at the house, but as far as pushing during labor or, breastfeeding, there's a whole bunch of things as a guy, you're like, oftentimes there's not a lot to do. And there's not a lot to say, but it's ministry of presence. You're there.
Yeah.
And you're saying, I love you, praying for you, let her be emotional, let her go through it all. And as a man, it's like, I'm just going to be there. And if I can say something or do something great, I want to jump in and do that. Other than that, it's ministry of presence. And it's literally being there. And honestly, when our kids were little, I was not great at that when the kids were born. As a man, you always look back with certain regrets. So for me, I think I was so consumed at work. Like we had C-sections. Well, Ashley was a C-section, first one. So then we had C-sections thereafter. Grace, we didn't have C-sections. I've never had a C-section, but Grace had C-sections. We scheduled them on Monday so I wouldn't miss a sermon. So I never took, paternity. I never took time off. I was just a grinder. And Grace's mom was awesome. She would come in and she would serve and love and be present. Yeah. And early on, I wasn't as present as I could or should have been. As we had more children, I think I did better just because then I would go take the kids out and have fun, and I want to be the fun dad. And, Grace is home with a baby, and then I get more time with the other children. But yeah, it's just that ministry of presence. It's being present, it's being available, and you're going to do great at that. And part of it is too, there is something magical about seeing your wife hold your baby. It's just, as a man, it's a complete mind melt of like, okay, this is really real. And you realize like, my goodness, I am so richly blessed. This is amazing. And as soon as you see your wife with your child, you realize every man would make a horrible mother.
Yeah.
Even a good dad is a bad mom.
100%.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. But you're gonna sense something in the spirit when you see your wife holding your baby that you've never experienced before. And you can't know till you get there.
Man, I'm excited.
It's going to be great.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
So let's go out with a bang. Last question, a little complicated. You were talking about the ministry of presence. You want to explain the difference between an anxious presence and a non-anxious presence and how to bring a non-anxious presence to your home, your wife, your kids?
Yeah, it was weird. I was reading just some weird leadership book. And it was talking about picking good board and team members. And it's like they need to bring a non-anxious presence into the room. And I think it actually comes out of a family systems guy. I think his name is Friedman. And so as a dad, it's like, think about growing up, your mom, your dad, when they came into the room, did they bring an anxious presence or a non-anxious presence? And, if your dad brought an anxious presence, then it's like, Dad's home from work. You're like, oh, you're like, oh boy, is he angry? Is he stressed? Is he distracted? Or it's like, Dad's home. And then the kids run to give Dad, a hug and a kiss. My daughters always ran, give me a hug and a kiss. And so as a man, there's a thermostat and there's a thermometer. And as the man, you want to be the thermostat. You want to set the temperature in the home. And so, I was talking to my son. My son Zach just had his firstborn son. He's a super cute, awesome kid. I can't wait to meet your kid. And we went to their house, first time to their house to hold the baby and pray over the baby. And I cried like I won Miss America and stuff, because that's the way that it is. But walked into their home and the environment was very calm. Everything was clean. Everything was put together. Nursery's cute. They really worked hard to get their home environment to be peaceful, to be restful. And I told him, I said, man, this is I think one of the reasons he's such a peaceful child, he's in an environment that's non-anxious. Yeah. It's not loud. It's not disorganized. Mom and dad are not tense. They're not fighting. And so, if dad can be the non-anxious presence, then home becomes a restful place. If dad is the anxious presence, then home is a stressful place. And if mom brings an anxious presence, dad needs to lovingly get mom to make a pivot. And if you think about that, I mean, all of us growing up in a home, was it an anxious or a non-anxious environment? Was it a stressful or a restful environment? And then as a husband and a father, it's like, because even all the social science and the brain science now says, if it's an anxious, stressful presence, the child senses and processes all of that. Yeah. And it's not good for them. Yeah. It's not, and the world has got plenty of anxious presence. So home needs to be the place that it's not like that. So I know you guys are setting up your home, and the women will talk about nesting. And that's all it is, what it is. There's something in them saying, I want to have a non-anxious presence, and I want to bring the child into a non-anxious presence. That's the entire nesting process for a woman. It's just how God designed her.
Do men understand the nesting process?
The arty creative guys that are in touch with their feelings may a little bit.
Because I could live out of the back of a truck. I mean, I'm good.
That was me. I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand women. Yeah. And I think any man who does is lying. And my hope would be before I die, just to understand one woman. That's what I'm working on.
It's a big goal.
It is. So far, I can't check it off my bucket list. I have not achieved that objective.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. Till next week.